This is Abraham's covenant. And we're going to start, this is the first covenant we're going to deal with. And we're going to start in Genesis chapter 15, verses 1 to 9. Let me do a little backstory on Abraham. Anybody that's not familiar with Abraham, this is a man that was in Ur of the Chaldees. I think I pointed that out when we looked at Mesopotamia, Ur of the Chaldees. And at the time, God introduced himself to Abraham and introduced himself by telling him to leave his family, leave his environment, his country, leave his father's house, and go to a land that he was going to show him. God initiated the contact with this man. All right. And so he left. There was some promises made that he would make of him a great nation and all this kind of stuff. And so by the time we get to this point in the book of Genesis, he had already left. His father died on the way to this place. He ended up in Negev in the region of Canaan. And by the time he gets here, his wife has not had a child yet he's promised that he'll have a huge number of descendants. And so he's maybe 10, 12 years into his sojourn in this new place, and his wife still can't produce no children. How do we know it was his wife and not him? Because we're going to see later that when he hooked up with his wife's servant Hagar, she got pregnant right off the bat. Okay, so it was on Sarah, who was his wife. And so we get to a point where Abraham is at a point where he's beginning to wonder if he's been had. He's beginning to wonder, move me from my family, all my connections, all my father's inheritance. I walked away from all of that. I'm here all by myself. People trying to kill me, trying to take my wife away, all kind of stuff going through, famines, all kind of problems he's struggling with, and he still ain't got one child. Okay. And so, and then his nephew, who had come on the journey with him, was kidnapped by a bunch of kings in the middle of a war. Sounds familiar. And he and some of his servants went and fought and got his nephew back. His nephew's name was Lot. And on his way back, this conversation takes place between him and Jehovah. All right, so that's where we are. It says, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Don't be afraid, Abram. I am your shield and your great reward. In other words, he's saying to him, the reason why you won is because I'm behind you. That's what he's really saying. Then Abraham changes the subject. Check where he goes. Abram says, "O sovereign Lord, how can I know you can give me what you can give me, since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus." This is on his mind. You done promised all this stuff, and I don't have the child one. Okay? He says, at verse 3, Abram says, "You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir." Then the word of the Lord came to him, "This man will not be your heir, but a son coming from your own body will be your heir." Your own body meaning his legitimate wife. You follow what I'm saying? Okay? He took him outside and said, "Look up at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offsprings be." So Jehovah doubles down on the promise. He repeats what he had already told him before. But check Abraham's check Abraham's response. Now, the Bible makes a parenthetical comment here. Abraham believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. We're going to come back to that in the new covenant. He also said, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land," so that's land and children, multitudes of children, "to take possession of it. Here's where it gets interesting. But Abram said, "O sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it?" Abram is concerned because he done heard this stuff before. It's been years since he said he left, and he's been struggling with all these problems. And so he asks a significant question. This is the key to understanding this covenant. It's this question: "O sovereign Lord, how can I know I hear what you're saying. You keep talking, and all I hear is talk. I need something more concrete than talk. Are you following that? I need confirmation. I done moved my family and all this stuff. You got to come up with something better than just words. Are you following me? And so listen to the response the Lord makes. Verse 9, the Lord said to him, bring me a heifer. Anybody know what a heifer is? It ain't Shaniqua.
Cow.
Why a cow? What's the difference between a cow and a heifer?
It's a female cow.
They're both cows because a male cow is a bull.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It's a female.
A heifer, if I got this right, some of y'all country folk can correct me. One is a cow that has not yet had a foal, a calf.
Okay. So like a virgin cow.
Right. I did not know this because I was at a high school and one of my students told me how the difference between a cow and a heifer. A heifer is one that has not, or a cow is one that already has had it. It's the difference between a virgin and a non-virgin, whatever that can be called. Okay. Bring me a heifer, a goat and a ram, each 3 years old, and a dove, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Does anybody know what this means? Remember, this is the question that is asked. How shall I know? How does this statement answer this question? Because in those days, when two families or two kings or two sheiks or two important groups, families or whatever, were going to make an agreement together, they had a ceremony called cutting a covenant. Okay? And in that covenant, let me see if I can get to that. Let me see if I can show you. Okay, let me finish this part, then I'll finish that part. Abram intuitively understood what the response meant because he asked the question. God says, bring me these things. Abram knows what to do because it was a common practice. Thank you. A common practice of those days. All right. Abram brought all these to him, verse 10, cut them in two, arranged the halves opposite each other, and the birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. Watch what happens here. I think this is where it is. All right, what you have here is that he cuts the animals in half, puts them in like a culvert where the blood can pool together, creating a pathway of blood. Okay? He cuts these animals in half. Here are the birds that weren't cut in half, and it creates a pathway of blood. Let's see who's going to do this. My brother right here. Come on. Let me borrow your book bag. Bring your book bag. I got one here. That's okay. All right. Let's say you're bigger than me, so just put it on either side. Anybody put yours right here. Put yours right here. These are the animals cut in half. These are animals cut in half right here, okay? And there's a pathway of blood. You and I am a warrior king. You're the warrior king because you got more muscles. Okay? I'm an agricultural king. We're good at agriculture, but we can't fight worth a lick. And so people are stealing our agriculture, breaking in and raiding our farms and stuff. But you know how to fight, but you don't know how to grow anything. You got, what do you call it? Not a green thumb. What's the other thumb called? A black thumb or whatever. I don't know what it is. And so we get to talking and say, you know what? I need somebody to protect my fields. Yeah, well, I'm hungry. I need some food. I need some food. And they negotiate over time and say, okay, you know what? Let's make an agreement. All right? You will protect my field. In exchange, we will provide you, agricultural products. Okay? And so once we all get the details worked out and how much and how little or whatever and how many soldiers is going to come and, and what happens, once those details are worked out, then the two of us meet in a ceremony where everybody is witnessing it. And you and I, come on, once we agree to it, we recite the terms of the agreement and we walk through the pathway of blood. reciting the terms. You follow me? All right, you can sit. All right. So what's going on? They're cutting a covenant, and specifically the term is cutting a covenant. What they are saying, and I don't have time to mess around with this, what they are saying is by walking through the pathway of blood and reciting the stipulations and the terms of the agreement, what they're saying is that let what happened to these animals happen to me if I violate the terms of this agreement. Serious business. It ain't like a warranty where they say, well, you just one day late and all that kind of stuff. It's or a marriage thing. No. These are serious covenants. In chapter 14 of Genesis, there are 4 kings that went up against 5 kings, because in those days when kings made agreements together, and I'm going to talk more about kingdom later, the main issue was tribute. If I'm the big king and I'm protecting you, I'm the one that is got the bigger army, I got, more resources and so on, and I make an agreement with a lesser king called a vassal king, and you stop paying tribute, I'm coming for your butt. Okay, I'm coming after you. All right, and if you look at Genesis chapter 14, 4 of the kings that were underneath a greater king decided, we ain't sending you no more cash. Oh, it's like that. Okay, I'll be right there. Okay, all right. So that's how serious this covenant is, a blood oath. Okay, and so Abram brings these animals and he spreads them out, makes a pathway of blood. But the Bible says that he's shooing off vultures and stuff because they see all these dead animals. You know what they're going to do. They're going to come try to get dinner. Okay. And so here's what happens next. Let's see if this is going to come up. There we go. It says, as the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said unto him, know for certain. What was the original question? How will I know? Right? Here's the answer. Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. This is a prophetic thing that he's saying in the midst of this covenant. Okay? Verse 15, you, however, will go to your fathers in peace. In other words, you're not going to see none of this. Okay? And be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sins of the Amorites have not yet reached its full measure. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot. Here we go. Let me see if he fell into a deep sleep. Let's go on. When the sun had set and a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. Do you remember the illustration I just did? Passing between the pieces signifies what? The promise, but it also signifies the individuals who are entering into the covenant, because your feet got to pass through that blood. And so you're the one making the commitment. Where's Abram now? He's sleeping. So who's making a covenant? Because what do we see going through the pieces? Smoking fire pot and a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. When Moses had his conversation with God, y'all seen the 10 Commandments? What did he see? A burning bush. God has often exemplified himself or showed up or came in the appearance of fire. And so God is passing through the pieces. What is God saying by passing through these pieces? It's more than a promise. What is he saying? He's promising, but what does a blood covenant make it? More than a guarantee. If I don't do what I'm saying, I have to cease to exist. You got that? He's trying to tell a man that is not going to see none of this happen. He's trying to tell a man that I'm going to do this. And I'm going to enter in the the kind of covenant that men get into, that they do at the threat of their life if they break any of the stipulations of what they're going to say that day. You follow me? It's a big deal. And he specifically, he didn't just go to sleep because he didn't have no rest the night before. He went into a deep sleep. I heard a preacher say this weekend. He says, when God's going to do something important, he put folk to sleep. Like when he made Adam, when he made Eve, he told Adam, go to sleep because I don't want you involved in this. I'm going to make what you going to need. All right. Anyway, that's my little something I want to throw in there. Anyway, he's in this deep sleep. So he specifically excludes Abram from this process so that God is covenanting with himself on his behalf. Why would he do that? Anybody think why would he do that? Think about it for a minute. Because if Abraham had gone through the pieces, what would have happened if Abraham broke any one of those stipulations? He'd have to, the agreement was over and he'd had to give up with his life. He prevented him from even making a mistake and not getting his promise.
So is this like a one-sided? Yes,
God is covenanting with himself.
Gotcha.
He's making a blood oath that I'm going to do what I said. I had a preach right there. Okay. He's making a blood oath that I'm going to do what I say. Okay. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram. To your descendants, I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Gigashites, and Jebusites. Try that fast. Okay. And so he promises not only that he's going to have, and notice the word descendants, not descendant, plural. And he also specifies land. When kings make agreements with other kings, there's always a land component. There's always some kind of component involving land. All right. Let me see if I have this in this particular thing. All right. I already covered that. I covered that. And here's the land. Now this gets into what we're dealing with right now. Okay. Because everybody's pointing to Abraham as their forebear, and they're pointing back to that covenant. Are you following me? Okay. It's because what's the battle about going right now? Land, this region right in here. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And here's the great river, the Nile, and the Euphrates. Between those two rivers is claimed is the promise that was given. This is a misnomer. It's not Israel's borders. It's Abraham's borders and his descendants. Did you hear what I said? This is the promise and the covenant given to Abraham, not to Israel. And I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. All right? So this is his covenant. I got to move. Okay? His descendants. Let me do this real quick. Let me show you who Abraham's descendants were. I'm going to walk. Here's Abraham. There's Sarah. All right? Now, even after the covenant was made, Sarah still couldn't have no kids. And after a while, Sarah, when Abraham finished hearing this conversation with God, he went to wherever Victoria's Secret was in those days and went and picked up, because God had just made a covenant. We're going to have kids. Okay. So he said, baby, come put these on. We're going to do this thing tonight. All right. All right. And so she did. And week after week after week after week became month after month, and even became years after years. And after a while, she said, oh, man, slow down. Slow down. Now, you got to understand, Abraham was 75 years old when he left Ur. So by this time, he in his 80s, and she's 10 years younger. So she's in her 70s. She's saying, bruh, what you think gonna happen? I'm gonna have a baby, And so she comes up with a strategy to hand her handmaid to him, because the handmaid who's a slave and her property, whatever that handmaid produces, is hers. So she said, why don't you just go? And this is a younger woman, you know. And so she says, you know, Abraham, why don't you just go ahead and do this, hook up with her, and whatever, you know, that baby, maybe that's the baby we're supposed to have. And Abraham thinks about 2 seconds and says, anything, baby, anything for you, sugar. Anything for you. And he does it, and bang, here comes Ishmael. And it causes problems in the house. And so here's where that shows up. Here's Ishmael. There's Hagar. And then here, look at all of his descendants. Remember, Abraham's descendants.
Here's the
Handmaid. That's her handmaid. And he goes and knock boots with a Hagar. And eventually, and all of this region, all of this section of Abraham's descendants ended up living in Arabia, where Islam was born. And so that's how they point themselves to Abraham. But God made a promise by oath that Abraham's descendants, not one descendant specifically, but all of them, would inhabit that territory between those two rivers. And where does these people end up living? In Saudi Arabia. Right in between those two rivers. So technically speaking, God's promise came to pass with Hagar as well. And what I'm saying is the covenant with Abraham includes them, because he promised his descendants. And if he doesn't give these descendants from him some of that land, then he violates the covenant. So the idea that only one group of people are entitled to that covenant is not true, because God's promise was to Abraham and his descendants. Got it? All right. All right. You ain't going to hear that, not even in some Christian churches. All right. Now, Sarah finally had Isaac. All right. But after Sarah dies, Abraham marries again. He's 137 years old when she dies. She's 127.
So she had a baby at 120 something years old?
No. No, she was 90. He was 100. 37 years later, she dies. But Isaac was born during that period before she died. But after she dies, this man's 137 years old. And he didn't have them little blue pills and none of that. He marries Keturah and he knocks her up. She has all these babies. Okay? You ever heard of Midian? The Midianites? Midian, if you read the story of Moses, he married a Midian. When he left Egypt and ran because he killed that guy, he went to Midian. That's where that name comes from. And technically, he's also a son of Abraham. And they lived within that region. So when you look at all of the people that lived in that region, all of them lived within the Nile and the Euphrates. So the promise that was given to him in that covenant came to pass. All of them lived in there. And when Moses married a Midianite woman, he was marrying a cousin, because they were related to Abraham. Okay? Yes, I'm gonna show that. I'm gonna show that in a minute.
Nice for drawing purposes.
I can send y'all this. Don't go. He had Esau. Isaac had Esau and Jacob, and it's Jacob that we're gonna move to next, because Jacob, his name was changed after he fought with an angel. We don't get into all that detail, but his name was changed to Israel. So the children of Jacob are actually the children of Israel. They got their own covenant.